policy statement. We also have 6 captains of industry who will share with us the impact that this midterm fiscal policy has on their various constituents. At this point, allow me to call upon Mr. Louis Chikurune, the Commercial Director of Daily News, to give us some introductory remarks. Over to you, Mr. Chikurune. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Daily News, it is my singular honor to welcome you all to the Daily News Business Breakfast Forum as we review Zimbabwe's midterm fiscal policy. We are privileged to have amongst us the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli Ncube, who is our keynote speaker today. We welcome you to this important webinar, sir. We have also been joined by the RBZ Governor, Dr. JP Mangudya. A warm welcome to you, sir. To our distinguished panelists, who shall be introduced later by our moderator, we thank you for joining us as we deliberate on the future of our economy together. Today's webinar is running under the national theme, Gearing for Higher Productivity, Growth, and Job Creation. And I'm confident that our moderator, Ms. Ncube Munzara, will handle this robust dialogue professionally and in line with our mantra of telling it like it is, without fear and without favor. To all our valued stakeholders, thank you for joining us today, as I wish our discussants fruitful deliberations. I thank you.
Louis, thank you very much for those welcome remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember to keep your microphones on mute so that we have a successful webinar. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Mangudya, to give us his remarks. Over to you, Governor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. I hope we had a good weekend despite the rise in the coronavirus cases. We need to take care of ourselves. So we are happy that we are going through this through Zoom, minimum conduct as much as possible. My remarks are very simple, is that we welcome the midterm budget review because it sets the tone that the government is serious on the management of its fiscal position. If you look at the government accounts as of now at the central bank, they're in surplus, which means that they're doing very well. And the combination of the tight fiscal regime together with the monetary side that we're trying to do, basically 2 things: the tight monetary money supply under the monetary targeting framework, together with the auction system of foreign currency. We have seen these 3 measures being pursued by government as consistent to ensure that the country does not go through a process of hyperinflation. So we do believe as a bank that we have reached a plateau in terms of price instability, in terms of exchange rate instability, and therefore what the budget does is to further reinforce those positions. So we are quite happy with what the Minister of Finance presented on Thursday, and also questioning about the 2%. The 2%, as we have discussed last time, was that it's basically for domestic transactions where we're paying, people are paying foreign currency to ensure that there's equity between those people who are paying in local currency and those who are paying in US dollars. We go to OK shop as opposed to foreign transactions when you come to the auction and then you are allotted and you pay outside the country. That one is outside the 2% IMT, as the minister said himself eloquently. So we are quite happy, and we'll benefit more under this webinar of questions and answers, and also for us to be able to attend to the questions that will be raised. Otherwise, as far as the bank is concerned, we are quite happy with where we are. We think we are on course to achieve price stability. We're in course to achieve foreign currency exchange rate stability. The premiums of foreign exchange premiums between the parallel exchange rates and the market rate of exchange measured by the auction is now low, is now narrow, which is what is always expected. As we said last time, we cannot eliminate the power markets, but it is about the gap that is between the two. We found that the power exchange rates are between 75 and 90, whereas the market rate of exchange is 68.88, and that tells you that they are narrowing, and therefore the way forward is that there is a sustainability of the auction. How do we sustain it, and to ensure that at least we keep on putting resources to the auction system, which is what we're going to do. Many people will be asking where is the money coming from? Coming from retentions, liquidations. It comes from the NGOs who are selling. It comes from the exporters who liquidate their foreign currency, like the mining sector and the tobacco season. As you know, we're still in the tobacco selling season. So at least for now, we are quite comfortable that the resources are being used in a manner that is efficient, utilizing of resources, and we are make sure that we promote that type of engagement. So overall, we think we are on course to ensure that there's price stability, and therefore the budget endorses that, the budget supports that. In fact, we are supporting the budget. So the budget makes sure that it gives us the trajectory. If the minister had put a supplemental budget, it means that he was going to add more money into the economy. But he says, let's use what is available. And therefore, we're trying to live within the means. So I want to thank you for giving me the time to make some introductory remarks, and we'll be able to engage much more as we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor.
Minister, how are you?
Very well. Good morning.
Yeah, you are doing a fantastic job, Minister.
First thing in the morning on Monday, we have to be engaged in this way. This is very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Dr. Mangujka, and welcome to our guest of honor, Professor Mtuli, Honorable Minister of Finance. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just heard the remarks from the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Mangujka, and he has shared with us his views on the fiscal policy. We know he will be delivering the midterm monetary policy soon. We look forward to that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on our various platforms. Just to reiterate the housekeeping rules, for those who are joining us on our Zoom platform, please keep your microphones on mute. For those who are joining us on our various social media platforms, which is YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, please feel free to share your comments on those platforms. We will direct any questions you may have to our various panelists, and please use the hashtag 2020 midterm fiscal review. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to call upon our Honorable Minister of Finance, Professor Mtuli Ncube. Honorable Minister, the last time we met on a similar platform, you took us through the stimulus package, the 18 billion stimulus package. Today, it is a very great honor to have you again on this platform to take us through the midterm fiscal policy. Your captains of industry are here today, sir. They would like to hear from you just the highlights, and they will share with you the impact of your policy on their various constituents. Over to you, Honorable Minister, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Vince, moderator. Good morning, everyone. It's early on Monday morning, but let's get on with business. Let me first of all recognize the governor and all the captains of industry who are on this call, on this, I think we should call it a breakfast meeting, except that we're not eating. That's the downside with COVID. We can still discuss, but there's no breakfast anymore. I really welcome you all. Colleagues, I think as the governor said, if I want to pick up on something that he said at the end, that we have to live within our means. Living within our means really means that we don't want deficits. We don't want budgets that move around a lot. We want consistency. Let's have one budget a year and that's it. And then we have to live within those means. That also ensures that then there is no extra growth in money supplies. We don't have to monetize any deficits. That's very, very important. And that was a very strong guiding principle in this review process, because I could tell that there was pressure. People were saying we should have a supplementary budget, but we thought otherwise, that should not be the case. We've only spent 47% of our budget so far. So why have a supplementary budget when the run rate is still below 50%, but also being mindful of the need to contain growth in money supply, deficits, and hence inflation. Now, you also notice that what I did in the budget, I separated the review in terms of documentation from any change in the finance bill. That's necessary because of the budget transparency requirements, that those two should be separate. The supplementary budget or anything that involves changes in the finance bill should be separate from a review of how the budget has been managed or spearheaded for the first half of the year. We're determined to keep improving in the way we budget, the way we consult, and that's how we really decided that we should stick to this. Now, colleagues, our national priorities have not changed. So it's halfway through the year. I'm advising that we stick to our national priorities, which is a focus on productivity and growth. This economy really suffers from low levels of productivity, especially in sectors such as agriculture. We want to improve level of productivity in that sector. We need to focus on job creation. With or without COVID, it is still an objective that we should focus on. And I'm looking forward to companies at the end of the year who can come forward and say, you know what, we have created additional jobs for the youth. They've been with us for a year. Since Minister, you announced this idea of the YETI program, we've come to claim our job creation rebate from you. I'm looking forward to that. I know it's a new program. It's not been easy to focus on job creation agenda in the face of COVID. We have to focus on competitiveness. Colleagues, some of you in the industry, you'll agree with me that there have been new entrants into the industry in the form of new producers, especially in the food sector. When you go into OKs or Pick and Pay, you find new products. I even bought a new product yesterday, which didn't exist a year ago. So clearly there's something that our weak currency is doing. It is encouraging productivity and competitiveness, and we should continue to promote that. Also, our growth needs to be shared, and we continue to share, to focus on sharing whatever growth spats, whatever programs are taking place right across the economy. We want to make sure that we balance out the growth and development agenda. Growth should be sustained, should be strong, it should be shared. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yes, Honorable Minister, we can hear you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Yeah. So let's not change the agenda of productivity, competitiveness, shared growth, and job creation. But also in terms of our fiscal focus, I'm still focusing on a budget deficit of 1.5% to GDP, and we're well on our way to achieving that. Now that is halfway through the year. So again, our budget stays at about 64 billion in terms of expenditure, and our revenues at 59 billion, and with a deficit of about 5 billion and budget deficit to GDP ratio of 1.5%. So with this year, we are going to meet again as last year, meet the SADC target of a deficit that is lower than 3%. Colleagues, we are in the middle of COVID, so we cannot run away from that. That's why we need to start. COVID is really wreaking havoc. We're now well over 1,000 cases, and deaths are creeping up. Quite clearly, we're in that steep part of the curve. We haven't flattened the curve yet, and the same applies to a good part of the world. It keeps coming back. Some countries have opened schools, but they've had to close them, and it just shows you that this pandemic is here to stay for a while. But really, the impact globally has been devastating in terms of the economy. You've seen the global economy. Initially, the growth forecast was like -3%. Now we're expecting something at -5%. In developed economies showing growth of -8%. So it's quite a sharp drop in economic growth. But we're optimistic that this will be a V-type growth scenario. So there's a big dip this year of -5% globally, and then a recovery into next year. And next year we expect growth to be obviously positive. And for Zimbabwe, the same. If I can just offload our growth, that we're expecting a drop in growth of about -4.5%, and then next year the growth recovers to about 7%, 2021, and then flattens to 5% and slightly below 2022 onwards. So again, a V-shaped dip and recovery growth scenario. And the same applies to the rest of Africa as well, sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the channels of transmission of this low growth, as you can imagine, and capitals of industry, please chime in here to confirm. We as government see it as taking place through the commodity channel, and then the disruption in supply chains channel, and then the travel restrictions channel. The commodity channel naturally impacts across all the sectors, key sectors: agriculture, mining, manufacturing. The supply chain disruption again is right across the board, and the travel restrictions impact mainly the hospitality and the tourism sector, and that's what really is working through the economy and causing slow economic growth, and potentially for some countries it will lead to higher budget deficits because of stimulus packages that are very, very costly. But so we know these are the channels. If you look at our tourism sector, really it's as good as closed for now, and we should think of how we should slowly open it, and it's beginning to happen. That kind of thinking is beginning to permeate through. Colleagues, I think it's fair to say at this stage, as a country, we've also been a bit unlucky. I think I can fairly use that word. I used it the last time. I said, who gets hit by COVID? And then, climate change, Cyclone Idai, the drought, and then power outages, and that go with it. So all these are force majeure events which are beyond our control. These are shocks that we've had to live it. We've been buffeted by these shocks, but then we have to still keep going. In terms of the sectors that we see being affected, summarizing those, obviously tourism, the tourism sector, 80% drop, and then 60% drop in tourist arrivals, and then 90% drop in hotel occupancies. Distribution is affected, agriculture is affected, the non-food sector, obviously the school sector being closed, that's affected, and to an extent, slightly the financial services sector, and also the mining sector. But some sectors will benefit, such as the health services sector, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals. Those sectors will benefit. ICT sector will benefit as well because of the use of e-commerce, virtual meetings, and then the food subsector will also benefit, and water and electricity sector will also benefit from the pandemic. If I were to switch to agriculture as a sector, certainly you've seen just a slight drop in the agricultural output so far, of about minus 2% overall. So it's basically a very flat scenario in the first half of the year compared to last year. In fact, you've seen an uptick in area planted for some of the agricultural areas, such as sorghum, millet, pearl millet, finger millet. These are the traditional crops. So the output there has gone up quite a bit. In terms of by over 100% in terms of output. The tobacco sector in terms of output as well is slightly flat, slightly lower, but prices have been fantastic, 30% higher, maybe thanks to supply constraints from other competitors such as Brazil. That's been helpful. And then we have also seen an uptick in sunflower production, cowpeas production, sweet potatoes, cassava, paprika. So there's some aspects of agriculture where we've seen quite a decent uptick, and this is appreciated. But the soybeans has been hit hard in terms of output. There's a drop of about 40% in terms of area planted in the first half of the year. But I must say that going forward, we expect agriculture to be driven by the new recovery plan, which focuses on productivity. Basically, if you look at the presidential input scheme, that's going to be driven mainly by the Fumvudza system, which seeks to maximize on productivity in terms of acreage, output per hectare in terms of yields, but also it optimizes on the use of water, that the size of the land is such that it is easy to water it and climate proof it. On the commercial agriculture, or command agriculture as we call it, that again, the model of partnering with banks will continue to make sure that there's discipline in the sector. And also for that one, we have also acquired some machinery, tractors, combine harvesters, and some of you in the banking sector will know that this program is now a leasing program. It's an equipment leasing program run again by the banks. I think we've got who is involved, CPZ, Stanbic, Agribank so far, but maybe some are coming on board as well. So that program continues, but again, we're focusing on productivity, focusing on those farmers that have water that can irrigate, but also investing more in irrigation. Evacuating water is critical for supporting agriculture. So that's the plan on agriculture. And again, we expect a slightly better season, but we want to focus on climate proofing agriculture in the main. Switching to the mining sector, we've seen in Q1 gold output dipping slightly, and then nickel output as well dipping, chrome dipping slightly, but palladium, platinum, and diamonds, we've seen an increase in output. So again, it's a mixed picture, but overall, for the mining sector, we expect a minus 4% drop in mining. But I must say, colleagues, I'm very impressed with the investment that I'm seeing generally in the mining sector. In the last 2 days, we're touring with the president in the Wange area. The investment in that sector is really amazing. I counted 4 new coking coal producers, and these are all foreign investors, and the domestic producers are also upping up their game. So there's really a fantastic investment in that sector, and that augurs well for the future of our carbon steel industry as well, which I think in the next couple of years is going to ramp up, and we see more investment in that sector, making use of that coking coal, which has been, is being produced so far. So that's the mining sector picture. It's a very promising picture again, and mining sector continues to be our largest foreign currency earner. But then there's this mixed picture in output, but generally the way is up. Now, turning to the manufacturing sector, colleagues from CZI, I try to confirm our figures that, again, we expect this drop of about minus 10% in the manufacturing sector. If you look at, for instance, the foodstuffs, almost 20% decline, drinks, tobacco, beverages, 15% decline. But there'll be some areas where there will be an increase. For instance, the chemicals and petroleum product sector, we expect a 10% increase in that. One area is for instance, area supporting the production of sanitizers. That should do well. Textiles and ginning will also go up. This is an area that supports the production of masks, and it speaks to the impact of COVID on those aspects of our industry that supply the equipment that we need to protect ourselves from the pandemic. But generally, a dampening of activity is what we see in the manufacturing sector, but with these pockets of growth. I'm going through my slides here. I wish they were up there, but anyway, I've got a slide here that shows how perhaps we should think through the tourism sector. That maybe is a decision about whether we open now, or maybe in 3 months' time, or at year end. And those 3 scenarios will really kind of show us where we end up by year end. That while we try to protect lives, perhaps we should work together with the industry and see how we could begin to open pockets of the industry, certain destinations, so that we can get activity going again. In the transport sector, again, that sector also has been impacted by the lower volumes in terms of what needs to be ferried along on our roads, on our rail. So it's being impacted as well and faces downwards. But we continue, though, in terms of investment in the sector as government. We continue to invest in our roads. Those of you who have used that road, the Harare Masingo Bike Bridge Road, you've seen the activity there. We continue to put money into developing that road and expanding it. And very soon we will start working on Harare Chirundu Road. So as government, we continue on our programs in the road sector, development sector. Even in terms of dams, in terms of other infrastructure products, other infrastructure areas, we continue to upgrade our dams, especially Causeway Dam. Start work on Kunzu Dam soon, but also Semwa Dam, Chivi Dam. Our work there is continuing. On power production, again, we have seen an improvement in power outages. Power outages have gone down. And that this is promising. That's a combination of rising waters in Kariba, as well as the fact that ZESA seems to be getting its act together in many areas, and that is very helpful indeed. Now, just a footnote on our balance of payments situation. If you look at data from the Reserve Bank and the Zimstats, it shows that we are in a very good position. That in fact, we were going to have a second surplus this year on the current account front of about $1.2 billion. Last year it was about 900 million, but there's been a complete change. I'm looking at the chart here. We haven't been in this situation since, I don't know when, maybe since the 90s. Looking at my chart here from 2009, we're in deficits all the way up to 2018, and then everything shifted to 2019 and 2020. So it's a very good balance of payments position that way. And then you know about the stimulus package already. What I can encourage from members of the corporate sector, that please come forward, work with the banks, work with Treasury and the Reserve Bank. Let's try to access this stimulus package and support our SMEs and the corporate sector. Please don't be shy, come forward and request support. Now, I've already mentioned that our GDP growth is expected to minus 4.5% 2020, and then we're expecting a recovery to 7.4% next year. So I think let's look on the bright side. The future is bright. We're going through COVID. Every economy is really impacted. It's tough out there. So we are suffering through this, going through the same paces. But next year we expect this growth of 7.4%, and then it would taper off to about 5.8% the following year. Then, in terms of the budget outturn, as I say, in the first half of the year, we raised revenues about 34.2 billion. 34.2 billion against our target of 32.1 billion. So we are slightly above it by 6.7%. And if you look at expenditures so far, we've spent 30 billion. So that leaves us with, of course, with outstanding payments of the order of about 3 or so billion. So that's why our balance in terms of the budget balance is an order of 900 million at the moment. So we're positive 900 million. If a simple takeaway is that our budget is balancing. We are not living beyond our means at all. We are living within our means. Now, if you look at public debt, obviously we're still at about 12 billion, just over 12 billion on domestic debt, and then our foreign debt still remains at 8.1 billion. So we're continuing to make our payments in terms of token payments to the World Bank, AFDB, European Investment Bank, and China. China Exim Bank will continue to make those token payments. We're staying in our commitments on that. But I must say that for China, we have received a moratorium, which says that, look, they're complying with the G20 resolutions that between now and December, they can give us stay of execution in terms of those payments. But we'll resume again once we're supposed to resume with no problems resuming in terms of those payments. In terms of the banner supply side of things, the governor can also add, I think really the takeaway, two things to take away there is that the growth in reserve money has slowed down, and that's a positive thing. But of course, you will still see some growth in broad money, but only because we're really converting US dollar deposits into and also loans into Zimbabwe dollars at the going auction rate, and that's then pushing up the level of broad money. But if you look at reserve money, which is what matters in terms of inflation, that remains under control at the moment. So there's really no reason why the exchange rate should behave the way that it is behaving. If you look at those within the banking sector, thank you very much. Your non-performing loans are well behaved. We're now down to 1.42% in terms of a ratio of non-performing loans, which is fantastic. And this is up from like 11% in 2015. If you remember December 2015, that's where the NPLs were. Now we're down to 1.42%. That's a major difference. Coming back to the exchange rate, colleagues, we're very pleased that we've made this progress so far in terms of the way the auction has worked in stabilizing and giving leadership and in really introducing a proper price discovery process to our exchange rate. So currently at 69, as you know, when we started with what it about 57.35 in the first auction, that was the weighted average. And even the spread was like between 35 and 100, but now the spread is narrower at 64 and then 85, and then we ended up at 68.9. So this is pleasing, but also in terms of allocations, we have government. The Reserve Bank has been really focused on the fact that we need to focus on those who are in the productive sector, who needs raw materials to produce as well. So you find that the allocations have skewed in the direction of productivity. So colleagues, really, if you look at the auction rate, it really ought to stabilize the exchange rate. We know the power rate is what is causing inflation because prices are linked to it. But if you look at the fundamentals, all the fundamentals really point to a stable exchange rate. One, we have a slowdown in growth in reserve money. And number two, we have no deficits. On the contrary, we have a surplus. Number three, we have a current account surplus as well. So the twin deficits are gone and the monetary growth is stable. So which other fundamental then ought to drive the exchange rate if it's not those? So we really ought to have a stable exchange rate. We're also still going through receiving inflows from the tobacco season, which is fairly strong. And so again, all the economic fundamentals are strong and appropriate for or supportive of a stable exchange rate. But we still have the exchange rate misbehaving, but the auction has put it under control. Now, in terms of inflation, obviously, I said this is linked to the power rate. We saw it dip slightly in June. But I think what is interesting to also focus on, colleagues, is what you call blended inflation, which is about 435% or so, lower than the 700 plus ordinary Zim dollar inflation. Blended inflation really refers to a weighted average between US dollar inflation and Zim dollar inflation, because now US dollar is being used for transacting purposes in the shops. So clearly, someone who's using US dollars is confronted with a different level of inflation from someone who's using a Zimbabwe dollar. So that blended inflation also is a good way to kind of, it's a pragmatic way to really try to capture the reality on the ground, which is that transactors are using both currencies as they transact, and may even be a better way to represent inflation than just pure Zimbabwe dollar inflation. What we can say is on Zimbabwe dollar inflation, we expect that to be about 300% year on year, by year end. On a month-on-month basis, we expected it to drop to the order of 5%. But then going forward, we will maintain fiscal discipline. We'll maintain the measures that have allowed us to lower the current account balance, to keep it positive, but also we'll keep a tight leash on money supply growth. There's very good progress as well, colleagues, on the structural reforms front. You saw the enactment of the Freedom of Information Bill, which repealed IPA. So both IPA and POSA have been repealed. A government is now on its second round on the ease of doing business. We're determined that, again, we keep moving up the ranks. So all the ministries have been allocated their areas of focus in terms of, for instance, the Ministry of Finance, we have to deal with the taxation of SMEs. We have to deal with the taxation of SMEs, those that are trading across borders. For example, we have to introduce a single window for taxation for various collections of various types of taxes through ZIMRA, and also a single window for taxation at the borders. So that's just some of the issues that we need to deal with. Also, we need to make sure that our company registry process, land registry process is electronic going forward. We need to create that platform where there's easy access of that information. Also on the political front, the polar process continues in terms of discussions among the leadership, His Excellency, leaders of other parties meeting from time to time to focus on the issues that impact our society, our economy, and our country. And then finally, colleagues, we are now also preparing the National Development Strategy, which will guide the budget for 2021, and then some national priorities in areas such as housing, health and well-being, human capital development, strengthening governance, developing our infrastructure and transportation, food security and nutrition, and then obviously protecting the environment, natural resource governance and management is very, very critical. Building the image of the country, and then devolution is very critical. Social protection and protecting the vulnerable. The digital economy will become even more important going forward, COVID. We need to focus on the youth because, frankly, they are the future. They are also the majority population. And finally, we need a macroeconomic stability, especially on the exchange rate front and also in dealing with inflation. But as a last word, colleagues, the future is bright. Let's all look forward to a better Zimbabwe, a stronger growth in 2021 and in 2022. And all the ingredients are in place for that growth to be strong, sustained, and shared. I thank you. Hello? Am I still online?
Yes, you are, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much for those remarks. We've really appreciated all the work that our government is putting in, and of course your ministry being responsible to ensure fiscal prudence. Honorable Minister and colleagues, just to reiterate, we are streaming live from Harare at the Daily News. We are also available on our YouTube platform as Daily News, Facebook, and Twitter. The hashtag that we are using is hashtag 2020 midterm review. Ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over to our captains of industry, we will take a few moments just to grab a cup of tea, grab some water, as we flight a few adverts from our various supporters. Thank you. Thank you very much to the tech team. Ladies and gentlemen, we are receiving quite a lot of questions on our various platforms. We will be directing those questions to our speakers, but we've received questions regarding the auction system. Is it temporary? Is it permanent? We've also received questions regarding our investor confidence on the closure of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange and the impact that it might have on investor confidence. We've also received questions on our Victoria Falls Stock Exchange. When is it going to be operational? Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now call upon our captains of industry, starting with the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe Vice President, Mr. Ronald Mtandagai. He will then give his presentation on the views of his constituents that he's representing, which is our financial institutions, the bankers. Over to you, Mr. Mtandagai, and we will have a moment at the end of the presentations for our panelists and our guests to deal with the questions that we are receiving on our various platforms. Thank you.
Thanks, Nobile. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, Honorable Minister.
Good morning.
Governor. Good morning, Permanent Secretary Guamatanga. I think the Minister has covered a lot of the issues from the banking sector. I think the issues around fiscal consolidation have been indicated, the twin deficits are being dealt with, and bankers are quite excited about that. The exchange rate issues, the introduction of the auction, which we all fully support, and it's leading to some convergence on the exchange rate front. I'm actually particularly pleased by the introduction of the leasing arrangement around agriculture. As you know, the previous arrangements on agriculture tended to crowd out financial institutions, and we are now on a trajectory where we are crowding them in. I think ultimately we need to go back to a position where lending for anything, including agriculture, must come through the banking sector. We've already started our journey along those lines. The issues I think that concern us as the banking sector are around re-engagement. We really need to try and ensure that that is fast-tracked. You may be aware that as Zimbabwe have been grey listed by both FATF as well as the EU, which means that we will be facing difficulties in making international payments if certain changes are not made. I'm pleased that I think through some of the measures that have been taken by government lately, those areas are being dealt with. Biggest issue in the financial sector obviously is confidence. Confidence around consistency of policy, confidence around ease of doing business. And I think the Minister has indicated on those issues, and we are quite pleased that those issues are being dealt with. I think finally is my comment. We do work very closely with the Minister of Finance and the Reserve Bank. We've been able to get some credit relief on COVID-related loans. You heard the Minister speak about areas that are affected by COVID-19, tourism particularly, and all the other sectors. There are measures in place to assist clients in those areas to be able to tide them over this COVID period. And banks are fully supportive of the measures that government is taking in those areas. By way of remarks, I think those are my initial opening remarks. Thanks, Ntobile.
Thank you very much, Ron, for that presentation. We appreciate it. Our guests have taken note. Honorable Minister, he'll be able to respond to the queries. But thank you very much. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our program. Please feel free to share questions on our various platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Our next presenter is Mr. Achilongo. Mr. Achilongo is the outgoing VP for Mashonaland West of the Zimbabwe National Chamber for Commerce, and he is here representing the president, Mr. T. Macheka, who was unable to join us today. Achilongo, over to you.
Thank you, Ngobile. Confirm you can hear me, Ngobile?
Yes, confirmed, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity. The Honorable Minister of Finance, Governor of the Reserve Bank and Permanent Secretary to the Finance Ministry, I acknowledge your presence here. Thank you very much for the remarks that you have made and the opportunity that you've given us to engage with you today. We appreciate, as private sector, the thrust that the Ministry of Finance has taken to come up with a tight fiscal and monetary regime. You have made comments around the fact that you are now going to work on one budget a year, and we note, Honorable Minister, that you've confounded your critics by not proposing a supplementary budget this year. We pray that the measures contained in the fiscal review without a supplementary budget will have the intended effect of laying the groundwork. And we note, of course, the thrust of the budget for 2020, which was gearing for higher productivity, growth, and job creation. Whilst we are there on the theme for the budget, high productivity, growth, and job creation is something that can be driven quite competently by a private sector when it's allowed to drive the economy. So as a chamber, obviously, we advocate for a strong private sector that is put at the center of development of the economy. And while we are there, we are looking at the environment that we are in terms of key emerging opportunities, where we have developing, possibly delayed by the COVID crisis that's ongoing, the opportunities that will arise from the ACFTA, with opportunities for the development of local value chains and the participation in regional value chains. We were looking obviously for measures in budgets going forward that will enhance our participation in that free trade area. We were also quite happy to see that taxable income was increased from 2,000 to 5,000, which was what we had requested in order to improve aggregate demand. But we are also concerned that volumes are still coming off, and in hindsight, perhaps we should have asked for a bigger increase, as you've given some of the figures there on downturns. So aggregate demand, Minister, is quite a concern for industry. We're also concerned about the IMTT on Forex transactions. Our concern is at government levying charges in US dollars when we are going to a monocurrency over the next 5 years. Perhaps clarity on that, on whether we're still going towards a monocurrency or we are now in a dual currency. We believe we should be showing confidence in our currency, the Zimbabwe dollar that we have established. And still on matters currency, we were also looking for, we had also submitted for a demonetization of bond notes to kind of, declutter the currency scenario there, so that we have less chaos there as we go towards stability. We were also looking at the Forex market, and we are quite happy with the Forex market as the auction system. rather than interfering with it. We also have issues around investor confidence, where the monetary system, through certain players that have issues with the Reserve Bank, has affected production and agriculture. If you look at the cotton sector, for instance, we've got players that have money stuck in certain financial instruments that cannot pay cotton farmers. Issues like this are affecting business, in the sense that when we are dealing with issues to do with regulation, we also need to look at the unintended consequences and ensure that we do not reduce business activity, but at the same time making sure that regulation is players are working within the rules. As I close, we're also looking forward, Minister, to an increase in investments in infrastructure. I know you've mentioned that roads are being invested in, but as you go into the new budget cycle, we would like to see an increase in infrastructure so that we may stimulate the private sector. We are also concerned about state-owned enterprise reform. It was a key issue in the budget in November, but we're not quite seeing the activity that we expected in the year based on the sentiments that you gave at the time. Linked to this is the issue of subsidies. We also need subsidies to be reviewed for sustainability in areas like transport, in areas like food production, where the vulnerable are being assisted. So I think basically on the fiscal review, on the issues that we submitted as a private sector and the issues that we are looking for, I think that's what I will remark at this point. Thank you, Ngobile.
Thank you very much, Archie. Thank you for your remarks. It's quite
Ngobile, can I have interjection? Can I interject? I'm going to a meeting now. I've been just summoned to a meeting, and I'm going to leave you with Mr. Masentu, who is our director for exchange control. Whilst he conveys on these issues, when I come back, I'll join in. I'm just been called to a meeting right now where I'm going. But whilst you have the mic, let me just assure members of the business community that the auction system is not temporary. It's here to stay. It's a good price discovery. Or what we are saying is that business speak to us through the price. And therefore, the price levels which you are giving us to the auction is your price. Because there have been many rates within the economy. Therefore, we could not choose which one's right and which one's wrong. Therefore, it's a better way of communicating with the industry. You will know better what is on the ground. So it's not temporary, it's permanent. And just to advise that, as the minister said, the money, the quantity of money in the economy is such that we now have more of forex deposits than the local deposits. In terms of quantity, 64% of the money supply in the country is foreign currency. 36% is local currency. In terms of loans, our loans are such that 58% local loans, 42% are foreign loans, are loans denominated in foreign currency. So if you look at the statistics, it tells you that the money supply in this economy is not significant enough to push the rate. And thirdly, that we continue with our mandate targeting framework, which we believe is critical. As of, just to give you other statistics, as of Friday this last week, the money on reserve money for banks on the reserve bank, with the use to purchase for foreign currency, was about 8.4 billion, which means that of the $42 billion local currency research last week, 23 billion is loans. The balance of 19 billion as of last week is made up of the money that is in treasury bills and savings bonds, and the $10 billion or so at the reserve bank. So the reserve money is low, the M3 is low, and therefore there are no fundamentals that should drive the exchange rate in Zimbabwe. That gives business assurances that we are in charge, we are in control of money supply. I've read many times that money supply is, even yesterday, I saw a fake social media that I know money is being printed. You should discount all those messages. I think that's why we are now publicizing on a weekly basis money supply. There are too many people who are against progress in this country, and I'm not very sure why we don't love each other ourselves. We always want to make sure people get surprises by these messages which are dangerous for the economy. But the child begins at home. The taste of the food is in the eating. We need to ensure that where you don't know, just advise us. So too many messages are being sent through the social media to ensure that the people get scared. As a business community, my prayer is that if you are not very sure, always ask. Sometimes they say in banking, trust but verify. So you need to verify the facts that ever you get along the way. So we're quite happy of also the response from business, but we want to request business to ensure that at least they also price their produce according to the market rate of exchange. We are happy that some businesses have done that. They are now using the exchange rate of the auction rate. Others are still lagging behind. We prefer to have self-compliance as opposed to both the forced compliance. I prefer self-compliance as opposed to be forced compliance. You know, you see a company today, a firm, still charging 110, the others 190. Themselves, they come to the auction at 70, but they prefer their consumers to pay 110 when they're buying their produce. You know, that inconsistency is not helpful for an economy. I think we need to have the consistency that is there between the fiscal and monetary side, as opposed to have inconsistency when business themselves, they want to hammer the consumers to get him. I was asking some of the customers, for some of your entities, some of your members, some of the people in Zimbabwe, they said to me, because we want to have more Zim dollars to go to the auction. Instead of saying that they are pricing for the purpose of their produce to be sold, they are pricing it so that they can get more Zim dollars from the consumers while they come to the auction. It's inconsistent in terms of with the economy. So our prayer is that if the business community adheres to what they are also saying on the auction rate, so that they use that for purpose of pricing, as opposed to price for the purpose of hammering and abusing the consumers. That's our prayer, and therefore we are saying that let's have compliance, which is self-compliance, as opposed to the forced compliance. But self-discipline is always more important, and it is always better than forced discipline. In this country, there's now general indiscipline. People, each one does these things for himself and good for us all, but I think it's not good. It's your price that we're giving to the extent to the auction, and therefore let's use it. So I think I just thought I should advise before I disappear now, and then I'll come back if I finish my meeting early. But I'm leaving with Mr. Masendu. He's going to take into account all the issues that you've raised. Otherwise, once again, thank you very much, Minister. Wish you well for the day, and we know that you are doing a fantastic job. Let's keep on pushing on. Let's remain on course, and let's ensure that we are in charge of these fundamentals, so that the life goes on. The stability is what we are asking for. The quest is for price stability, for exchange rate stability, for the economy to expand, to have jobs, and indeed productivity. Once again, good morning, and I'll come back when I finish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mangujka. And welcome, Mr. Masendu, who is the Director of Exchange Control at the Reserve Bank. We are happy for you to join us and represent the Governor of the Reserve Bank.
I'm also going to the same meeting. Governor and I are in the same meeting.
Oh, okay, noted, Professor Mtuli.
Yes, so what will happen is that I have got the PS, Mr. Vumbe and Mr. Mpambela, who will continue with the meeting. Once the meeting is done, we'll come back and rejoin. But there are three areas that I just want to respond quickly on, going back to what Ronald Tandagai referred to, the need to keep building confidence. I agree with him. The need for us to accelerate re-engagement, I agree with him. I must say, Ronald, you know, this COVID-19 is really curtailed. I mean, we can't travel. And to hold meetings on Zoom while you're negotiating with people is not easy. But we keep pushing. I agree with you that we need to push harder on re-engagement so that we can open up our economy and start, receiving credit from those who need to lend us money. From VP of ZNCC, is it Achidongo? You mentioned the issue of IMTT tax and forex. This was just to create a level playing field, because we realized that after having allowed citizens to use US dollars in terms of free funds, then they were not subject to IMTT for certain transactions. So we wanted to create a level playing field. So we had to be clear and say that everyone pays it. You mentioned the issue of, you said that you're happy with the Forex system. There may be issues for the payment of cotton farmers. I was going to leave that to Governor, but he's had to leave. I take your point about more investment in the infrastructure space. I agree with you. Because really want to make sure that our budgets are more investment oriented rather than consumption or recurrent expenditure oriented. I agree with that thrust. I'm also frustrated that our state enterprise reform agenda is not as moving as fast as we would like it to move, but we're still pushing. It's slow, we're still pushing. It's just that it's a very complicated process. We have to work with the boards, with the CEOs, with the parent ministries. We have to find advisors, and just the procurement processes takes long just to procure these transaction advisors. But we're still focused on getting this done, but it is slower than initially anticipated. Then on the issue of subsidies, again, the subsidies issue is really under control. That's why we're able to record a positive balance in our budget deficit, primary budget deficit for the year. So it just shows you that our subsidy program is under control. What we need to work harder and as government is targeting the subsidy in the first place. We are quite aware that, for instance, the roller mill subsidy, some of the beneficiaries are not the vulnerable, frankly, and then it is also subject to abuse. We haven't been able to fully close all the loopholes on the abuse in the face of shortage of maize meal in the first place. That just magnifies the problem. So we are aware there's a targeting challenge, but these subsidies are well under our control in terms of how we budgeted for them. You shouldn't worry about that, but also we'll reduce them going forward. We'll target them better. There's an important comment that Achitongo made about putting the private sector at the center of the economy. That's exactly what the TSP says, putting the private sector at the center of the economy. Therefore, it's not surprising that we have changed the model. For instance, on Command Agriculture, it is now private sector centered. It's the banks who are working with the government. Also, the mechanization program, tractors, command harvesters, those are also now being administered by the banks, and we'll make sure that a leasing company develops. Our aim is to make sure that we craft or rebuild institutions, private sector institutions that support agriculture, leasing companies, different types of companies. All those will be supported, and to make sure that everything that we do is private sector centered. On the Victoria Falls, I know there may be questions. Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, yes, we're putting the legal framework in place. I have to go to Parliament to make sure the various statutes are passed, the various acts are passed. So in the next 3 weeks, the Parliament should deliberate over those and conclude. And then after that, we'll be able to launch the exchange. I would say 3 to 4 weeks, we should be able to launch the exchange. I know there's a question about when will the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange open. We're waiting for the conclusion of the investigations led by the Financial Intelligence Unit. They should be able to conclude within the next week or 2 weeks, and then we'll review that and then decide on the modalities for reopening. But it will be reopened, for sure, it will be reopened. You shouldn't be worrying about that. It's just a matter of going through the paces and receiving the reports once the investigation is complete. And it should have certain recommendations, and we'll follow those recommendations so that we are systematic. All we are trying to do is regulators is to intervene the right way, is to be positive about the issue. That's really our intention, and make sure there's some discipline in our private sector activities, and government and the private sector work as partners to develop our economy. Thank you very much. So I will rejoin once I'm back from the meeting.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, Professor Mtuli. Welcome, Clive. Welcome, Mr. Andrew Vumbe. You will stand in place of the Honorable Minister until he returns. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our program. We are receiving quite a lot of questions on our social media platforms, and I am directing them to the various speakers as we go along. Up next, we have the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries President, Mr. Henry Ruzvidzo, who will also give us his reaction to the midterm fiscal policy statement. Mr. Ruzridzo, over to you. You may unmute your mic and also switch on your video so that we can see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ngobile. Good morning, PS, Minister of Finance. Good morning, Mr. Vumbe. I think my colleagues, are you hearing me, Ngobile?
Yes, Mr. Ruzridzo, you may carry on. We can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Yeah, I think I listened to the presentations by the governor and the minister with a lot of interest. They both showed a lot of confidence, which is heartening for us to hear. The comments from colleagues from banking and from ZNCC, I think we share those same sentiments. Perhaps just to add areas maybe where we a little bit worried, starting with the COVID crisis. I think developments in the recent past would indicate that we may have a bigger problem than we are, indicating in our numbers, even in the midterm revised budget. Our biggest fear from industry is that we may actually see operations forced to stop because of cases, within our business operations of COVID. And the cost that we are assigning to the efforts to deal with COVID may not be as has been indicated. And we really need to maybe look at it with more realism, if I may use that word. And then to touch on the dollarization plan, I think my colleague from ZNCC did touch on it. The minister, I think in his quick response, did not quite indicate the direction that we are taking. We would really, for confidence building, need to see a plan on de-dollarization that says over the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, these are the steps that are going to be taken. That did not come out very clearly from the presentations. And then the auction system, I think we have welcomed that. Companies are now able to obtain foreign currency through the formal system, the auction directly and through the banks and bureau de change. However, we believe that system needs to be supported with more measures to encourage generators of foreign currency to send money to the auction. And then when I was listening to the minister, he talks of the national priorities remaining the same, which is to focus on productivity and growth, job creation and and focus on competitiveness and growth that is sustainable and shared. Maybe my suggestion would be if the ministry could also then include measures on a regular basis that show us our progress towards those goals. So perhaps we need to shift targeting investment in the productive sectors as a measure of performance. Can we also target output from the productive sectors as a measure of performance over 6 months when we do our reviews? And the employment levels that have been created, I think it would be important to know what the outcome has been. We are in austerity. We have dealt with the deficits. I hope we can sustain those things because that's what is important for business to make progress. So I think with those short remarks, I will end my contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ruzridzo, for your remarks. Some of the questions we are also receiving on our various platforms touch on the items that you've also mentioned, particularly to do with, ZIMRA should be accepting tax in local currency so as to stimulate the use of our local currency. We've also received questions regarding the impact of COVID on our health sector, particularly the government's approach to try and address the salaries of the health workers. We have seen a lot of our health workers going on strike, and this is quite devastating, particularly when we're in the middle of a pandemic. So we've received questions to say what actions is the government going to take in order to address the concerns of the health workers. We've also received questions regarding the capacitation of our health institutions. We've seen quite a lot of private sector players step in assisting with that in our major cities, in our major central hospitals, to try and capacitate them to be able to deal with the health situation that is posed by COVID pandemic. But we also have a request to say, what else is the government going to do in that regard? Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our presentations. Up next, we have Mr. Farai Mtambanengwe, the founder and chief executive officer of the SME Association of Zimbabwe. Mr. Mtambanengwe, you may go ahead with your presentation. Please unmute and also put your video on so that our guests can see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nobile. I hope you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can see you, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll start obviously by just acknowledging this platform, acknowledging you guys as the Daily News for creating it, the minister, the governor, and the senior government officials here present, as well as fellow captains of industry and commerce. As has been said, I think we definitely are standing on a new threshold. For me, I will not echo what everyone has said. Definitely, we are headed in the right direction. All I can say is that we have been here before, and we've still deviated from the right direction. And we've been doing this for 23 years. I hope that this time we are going to stick to the right direction. I think the governor and the minister have expressed that sentiment. So I'd like to congratulate both of them on that very important stance. And it's important because it lays the foundation for everything else. We cannot achieve productivity growth. We cannot achieve growth as a nation without that macroeconomic stability. If we do not have a proper monetary base and we do not have a proper foreign currency market, you know, everything else falls out of the window. So the first thing is obviously we need to make sure that that stability is retained. And then I'm just going to also comment from a macroeconomic point of view, having put in place the measures that the minister and the governor have put in place. I think the IMTT issue becomes topical because if we go back to when the IMTT was introduced, it was introduced principally because of the high inflation that was there, the surging money supply. So it was a mechanism to control that. It was also a fiscal instrument to raise revenue for government. Now, when you introduce the sort of stability, that what is once you stabilize you have your fiscal discipline, you curtail money supply growth. That IMTT tax now starts to have potential negative effects in terms of excessive taxation of the economy, as it were, and especially of industry and commerce. So my suggestion there would be for the ministry to start to consider changing that IMTT into some form of a withholding tax, so that when one then submits their returns, that IMTT is taken as a prepayment on their taxes. Because if we do not do that, I think the danger that we now are facing is the danger of stagflation and possible recession due to a lack of currency, because the Zim dollar in itself is tight. The exchange rate is far too high. But what is going to most likely going to happen, and what we are already seeing, is that there is resistance for that exchange rate to correct. Prices are remaining high, so that in itself is going to induce stagflation in the short term. And if that continues, we will get recession coming through. And I think that is the big and present danger that our economy faces. So I would encourage the ministry to look into that IMTT issue. Can it be converted into a withholding tax? And then I'm going to move into specific issues that affect us as a constituency. First thing is that obviously we still do not have access to that auction rate. Much as the auction itself is functional, it's serving the interests of my colleagues from CZI and ZNCC. It's not serving us as the SME community because obviously we cannot hit that $50,000 threshold. And unfortunately, the trading within the banks has not occurred. The trading within the bureaus is also not there. So that is an issue which I think is important. We've tried to engage with the banks to look at possible consolidation of our the small parcels that our members require. They obviously have not been able to do that because of the conditions that the auction imposes, which is the conditions around the need to verify foreign FCA balances and so on, the KYC requirements. So for us, that is our major issue at the moment. We still do not have access, despite the fact that the auction is working. So this is why you are seeing that prices are remaining high, because we are still accessing off the parallel market, which is still high. So I think we are hoping that convergence will happen soon. But in the meantime, I think especially the Reserve Bank, the Foreign Exchange Department needs to put some thought into seeing how the bureaus can be activated so that we as the SMEs are also part of this, and then we can actually start this, because I know the governor, even the minister, expressed the sentiment that the auction is working. Why are prices not rising, not coming down? They are not coming down because the majority of players are in the SME sector, and the majority of players are still using the parallel market, even though that has slowed down, but it's still high. It's still much higher than the auction rate. So we need access to, or we need formal access to foreign currency. That is the number one problem that we have. Then I'm also going to speak to the action which was carried out on EcoCash, specifically, or mobile money generally. Obviously, we understand the concerns. We understand what was going on on the mobile money platform. But unfortunately, it has also impacted on livelihoods, because there were a lot of the agents, a lot of families that were dependent on EcoCash primarily as a livelihood source. But from a secondary point of view as well, that was the medium of transaction for most people, because remember, EcoCash came in as a financial inclusion tool. So basically what has happened is that there is now a return to financial exclusion because of the exclusion of the EcoCash platform. So we hope that the authorities can resolve the issues that have been there, obviously, around currency manipulation and so on. We hope that those can be resolved quickly, but that mobile money be brought back into play. And then my final point would be that having laid the groundwork, obviously, we are saying those are the big blocks, those are the foundational issues that needed to be addressed, but there are still quite a number of underlying issues. We still need to incentivize investment. We still need to incentivize infrastructure development. If we look at our SME sector, the way they are operating, it's obviously not ideal, and we understand that we do not want to have people on the streets. We do not want to have people in we've also even put forward proposals for taxation for SMEs, which I think the minister alluded to. We put these proposals through, I think it was towards the end of last year, both for taxation of on-land taxation as well as tax at the border. We've put in the proposals. There's not been much progress on those things. We hope that those things will be accelerated so that we do, because obviously, if we look at the production growth, the minister even alluded to new products coming on board. As a sector, we are very active. We are very keen to contribute towards the growth of the economy. We are naturally incentivized to create, to produce, and to create employment, provided we have the right environment. So what we are saying is rather than just focus purely on FDI, focusing purely on the large corporate environment, we need to look at incentives to boost or to bolster the participation of SMEs in the economy, and also to obviously give them decent working spaces to enable them to participate on the formal platforms that will enable them to also contribute formally into the economy. So I think on that note, I would end my contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mtambanegwe. Thank you for your queries. Just to also understand some of the concerns that you raised, because we've got quite a lot of comments from our audience about the issue of high prices. My understanding of your presentation was that the majority of the businesses are SMEs and they cannot access the auction system because 50,000 threshold is quite high. And so they get foreign currency in the black market, and in turn that has an impact on their pricing structures. So maybe to the Reserve Bank, a question would be regarding the threshold of the Forex auction, to say maybe that needs to be revised. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue with our program. Up next, we have, Mr. Isaac Kwesu, who is the CEO of the Chamber of Mines. Mr. Kwesu, you may go ahead with your presentation. Please may you unmute and also switch on your video so that we can see you. Thank you, sir.
Good morning and thank you very much, moderator. May I start by recognizing the representatives from the Ministry of Finance and Reserve Bank, and those jury representing the Honorable Minister of Finance, as well as the Governor of the Reserve Bank. I would like also to thank the Honorable Minister in absentia for his mid-term budget. I think it touched on pertinent aspirational aspirational issues, and to a larger extent identified key challenges facing the economy, which are currently manifested in runaway inflation and exchange rate depreciation. And more pleasing is the laid foundation, as well as consolidating aspects in the midterm to address these macroeconomic imbalances to sustain stability and economic growth. We are pleased to hear the Minister specifically outlining how the twin challenges of inflation and exchange rate will be addressed in his budget, and specifically how also the Reserve Bank's monetary policy framework will fine-tune the outlined objectives by the Minister of Finance. We are happy also to note that already there have been some measures that have been instituted by the monetary authorities as well as the fiscal authorities in aligning some of the indiscipline, market indiscipline, as the Minister said, as well as the fiscal indiscipline itself relating to running a budget surplus. We are very happy as a sector to note that there's something going on addressing money supply growth, velocity of money to ensure that we restore confidence in the market and economy at large. There's one important point that I would want to underscore, and this has also a lot to do with the productive sectors. This issue relates to sustaining the macroeconomic fundamentals of inflation and exchange rate in a favorable manner. And the most important or missing aspect is output growth. We need to ensure that as a country, we achieve output growth to sustain low inflation as well as a stable exchange rate. It is against this background that as a sector, we appeal to government to address the supply side distortions. Yes, to a certain extent, when you read this mid-term budget, you may pick that government has tried to touch on some of these issues, but not conclusively. We need to address the supply side bottlenecks, as I have said, specifically in key product sectors of agriculture, manufacturing, and mining. If we have low inflation, agriculture and manufacturing are key to sustain low inflation, whilst mining is key for foreign exchange stability, as well as an efficient auction market. An auction market that is supported by volumes. An auction market that is not thin, an auction market that is low spreads, and where volatility is at minimum. I would want to take this opportunity to lay out some of our perspectives in relation to the 2020 midterm budget, which was announced by the minister. We can divide these issues into three main areas. One, the quick wins. Two, the medium, and three, the long-term issues relating to mining perspectives. One, when we talk about the short-term, which are quick wins, as a sector, we are advocating government want to come up with a framework for marketing and pricing, which will ensure that there's minimum mining leakages, or which will also ensure that there's enhanced production. Currently, when one takes gold into argument, we have noticed gold output decreasing at a time that the world price of gold is going up. There's no other opportunity that the country can take advantage of, specifically attracting investments, as well as increasing our volumes for exports, which is really critical for the success of the auction system. Currently, the gold subsector is characterized by anomalies relating to pricing, as well as marketing arrangement. We know the Reserve Bank will be coming up with their monetary policy to fine-tune the fiscal issues that have been laid out by the minister. We really recommend them to address these anomalies to ensure that the marketing arrangements for our gold is in line with best practice or international experiences that will make sure that we will catch up. In Tanzania, we are currently less than half the output, mainly because we are not playing the games in terms of the world practice. The second issue, which is also a quick win, is the efficacy of the auction market. You may recall that exporters need to be protected in terms of value of their surrendered portion. Current mines surrender as much as 50% of their export proceeds. And the market, if it's not efficient or if it is volatile, we can take an example. The exchange rate at the auction started at 25. implying the miners who surrendered their 50% were paid at a rate of 25. Now the rate is almost around, above 65 within 3 weeks. It means the miner who may want to augment his foreign currency for operational capital or even to buy equipment and spares, you have to come back on the auction market at a price which is 3 times. And this would definitely kill the miner in terms of going concern. The viability will not be amenable. So we need to come up with a mechanism that will ensure that there's adequate volumes on the market, that will ensure that when the miner surrenders this portion, the round trip in terms of coming back on the market will reduce his exposure. So volatility must be as minimum as possible if we have to make sure that miners and other exporters survive on this auction market. So the critical success factors for an efficient market must be addressed. And as I've said, this has a lot to do with the volumes. We need exporters to export more. We need the exporter to be incentivized to increase output so that we can ensure that the auction market supply side will continue matching the demand. As long as the demand outstrips supply, this rate will not be stable. So this is the second issue that I would want also to ensure that both the fiscal and monetary address, so that we guarantee the success of this auction market. The medium, I'll combine them long-term issues. For mining, the minister talked about the appetite in the mining sector being very high in terms of investors. We need to make sure that this becomes a reality. And more importantly, we need to address the ease of doing business that make mining compete at world level to attract the much needed capital. Mining is long term, it's capital intensive, and it requires a lot of patience. And we need to make sure that we address all impediments that affect ease of doing business, either these are from fiscal side relating to tax, either these are monetary that I've just touched on, as well as any other structural issues that continue to affect mining, whether they are legislative, whether they are of policy nature or regulatory. All these issues must equally be addressed. I think some of these issues, I read the budget statement, at the end, they were also touching on how the Minister of Mines will also aim to achieve 12 billion by 2023 through addressing some of these impediments. Then the elephant in the, also the other elephant in the room is...
Sorry, Mr. Kwesu, if I may just interrupt, please may you wrap up in the next minute or two?
Yes, I think 2 minutes, that's too much, I'm almost done. The other elephant in the room relates to the consistency and predictability of policies that support mining. And these policies must be addressed in line with the expectations of restoring value and viability in the mining sector. A lot of these policies have been submitted to government, and we will be engaging the government and our parent ministry in that regard. These are my submission, moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwesu. We also really want to ensure that our guests, that is Mr. Masendu, the Director of Exchange Control, who's representing the governor, our Mr. Clive Mpambela, and also Mr. Bumbe, and Mr. Guamatanga can respond to some of the issues that have been raised. So if I may call upon our last speaker, Mr. Denford Mutashu, who is the president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers, to give his remarks. Once he has completed his remarks, I will hand over to our guests who will then respond to the questions that we have received so far. Mr. Matashu, over to you, sir. Mutashu, over to you, sir. You may unmute your mic and switch on your video.
Thank you, moderator. All protocol observed. My take is that there are quite a number of positives to be drawn from the budget. For example, the increase of the tax-free threshold from 2,000 to 5,000. However, I think it could have been increased further because the current consumer basket for a family of 6 is sitting at 13,700. There is also need to give key clarity on whether the economy is progressing towards de-dollarization or it is re-dollarizing, because what we see is an appetite for continued use and circulation of the US dollar in the economy. And I'm also going to look at the issue of salaries. I think this is very pertinent and fundamental, and the budget with a surplus then should actually be looking at how it should deal with the issues of salaries, especially in the public sector. Currently, government is committed to pay in US dollars, I think 75 US dollars and 30 US dollars for pensioners. But so far, there isn't clarity on how this is going to be operationalized. How are the civil servants going to access the money? Is it in US dollars? Is it plastic money? Or how is it going to be accessed? And the refocus really should be looking at the capacity of our health institutions. I'm not happy that we seem to be comfortable and believing that COVID, and we've actually sort of passing through the COVID-19 pandemic, but the reality shows that the cases have started rising, deaths have also started rising, and I'm looking at a budget then that should look at revamping of, key referral institutions like Harare Hospital, Paranetwa Hospital. If it means we have to increase the number of ICUs and also procurement of more linen and etc., and capacitating the nurses and doctors so that at least they're geared up for the rising cases. The auction system, foreign currency auction system, is very welcome, even though it remains looking exclusionary, because the bulk of business currently, of course, is powered by the SMEs as well as the informal sector. So we need to look at ways to deal with how we can also support the activities of the informal sector. And it has captured quite a number of people in terms of providing employment. And of course, I would also like a comment from the Minister of Finance on how the budget targets targets to improve the situation of the vulnerable groups in our community. For example, people living with disability, the elderly, women, the youth, the rural folks, and those generally that are unemployed and poverty stricken, because the few people that I've spoken with have actually indicated to me that good budget, but it is not pro-poor, and it does not resonate with a lady who is selling tomatoes at Mbarem Sika, and her situation, is it going to improve, and how is it going to improve so that she can produce more of what she is selling there? And I think it is also critical that we channel more liquidity to SMEs, channel liquidity to households, channel liquidity to informal workers, because they've been hard hit. Currently, there are businesses that are in the informal sector that have been closed since the beginning of the lockdown in March. Unfortunately, tenants, rather landlords, have continued to demand rentals, but these are closed, and some of them have actually vacated and have been forced to vacate because they cannot continue to raise the rentals and meet other general costs. So I think the budget should also then refocus and speak those issues. The IMT tax, it is generally a matter that has actually been quite contentious, because if we are going to bring in more tax on the vulnerable, on the 2% on foreign currency, it simply then means that on the flip side, the support towards the vulnerable members of our society is actually eaten away by the 2% that is actually coming through in a situation where they could have been receiving more and more support from the institutions of government, etc. And the issue of agriculture. The agricultural production certainly is very fundamental, but I'm going to look at how is it going to be improved in terms of easy access to inputs and the general cost of inputs. If we really are going to improve agricultural production, then we've got to look at how is it for the communal farmers, subsistence farmers, to access inputs. Yes, the 120,000 tons for top dressing is a very key and progressive budget pointer. But I think if you look at Kenya, for example, it is actually giving out to 200,000 smallholder farmers, the top dressing to 200,000 smallholder farmers. And I think that is in line with ensuring that we then reactivate the productive sectors. Yes, we need also to look at quite a number of other issues that includes the state enterprise reform agenda. Yes, currently we've it has been quiet, but I think there was a lot of momentum at the launch of the TSP, but I think right now we don't seem to see a lot of progress there. So I think going forward, we would look at issues of recovery strategies, but I'm looking at what are we going to be doing in terms of containing the spread of the scourge now. Can we pull all our resources towards maintaining or rather reducing the spread of COVID-19 because it has got a threat, like my brother has indicated. The threat is that we may actually come back full cycle and even be forced to close most of the businesses that have reopened because of the rising cases. But we need then to move out also and to look at what are the recovery strategies going forward, especially include a strong structural component to reduce dependence on external financial flows and global markets. A lot of countries have domesticated in line with the local content policy and in line with the reducing over dependence on imports. What are we doing really, especially on small businesses alongside devolution that we've already spoken about, the development of rural district councils so that they can actually become supply engines, because what we are talking about here is supply of key basic commodities. There is no reason why peanut butter, which is manufactured in Harare, has got to be sold in Bulawayo or otherwise in Victoria Falls. So I think this is something that we need to actually look at, because currently we need to focus on a productive transformation agenda, which strengthens the value chains, reduce vulnerability to external shocks, and also advance the digital transformation, build economic resilience against the future crisis. But the central focal point about this budget, which a lot of people have spoken about, is what is the impact on the impoverished, on the poor, the poverty actually levels in the country have been rising, and how are people add the COVID-19 to that? How are people going to come out? And the impact, the general impact, has been quite negative, and has been there. They're having to be forced to pay rentals in foreign currency that they cannot access at a domestic level, and even the cost, the general cost of day-to-day. Look at the individual who is in a location in the residential area there. So that is my area of focus, to say the impact of the budget on the ordinary man on the street. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mutashu from the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from all our industry captains. They have shared the concerns of their respective constituents regarding the contents of the midterm fiscal policy statement. I see that our guest of honor, Professor Ncube, is back. He will be then assisted to respond to some of the issues that were raised while he was away by his team, who he shared with us, Mr. Mpambela, Mr. Vumbe, and of course, Mr. Guamatanga, our permanent secretary. Welcome back, Professor Ncube. Before I come to you, sir, maybe we can ask the Reserve Bank Exchange Control Director, Mr. Masendu, to respond to some of the issues that were raised. Mr. Masendu, you were sitting in during the presentations. You may go ahead, sir, and respond to some of the issues that were raised by the ZNCC, the CZI, the SMEs Association, Chamber of Mines, and also the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers. Over to you, Mr. Masendu. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure you can hear me, is it? Hello?
Yes, yes,
okay,
you may go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I will proceed. Morning to you, moderator, and all protocol observed. Just to also acknowledge the Minister of Finance and the Permanent Secretary. I will specifically touch on a couple of issues that have been raised from the presentations that were done during my presence online. And those from my summary speak mostly into the operations of the foreign exchange auction system, which the governor also spoke into. And I think the key issues that are being raised by the majority of the participants are to do with the efficiency and the sustainability of the auction system. I think the governor did indicate that one of the key parameters or one of the key issues relating to the auction is price discovery. And a number of the participants have raised the issue of exchange rate stability, which is critical and which is key, and which is one of the main objectives of this particular auction, to bring together buyers of foreign exchange and sellers of foreign exchange onto a common market, and to ensure that we have got a market-determined exchange rate that then is used for all the pricing for all our transactions. And key issues that keep coming in are to do with the supply of foreign exchange. I think the Chamber of Mines CEO, Mr. Kwesu, did highlight that exporters become very critical, particularly when you talk of the supply of foreign exchange to the auction system. And I think what we have seen over the past 4 auctions that have been done is a gradual alignment of the exchange rates to the market. And this is what is critical. Yes, there was that big jump from the fixed peg that was there of 25 to 57, then 60, 63, 65, and now 68. What we are happy with is that there's a flattening of the exchange rate in terms of depreciation. I think we have not, the first auction, there was quite a significant depreciation. But what has happened lately is that the depreciation is flattening. And we do believe that we will be able to then achieve that exchange rate stability. Yes, we need to continue to incentivize the exporters. And on the portion of export receipts that are liquidated onto the auction, we believe that the exchange rate that is being offered now at the auction rate is favorable and market related, and we need, of course, to continue to improve on the efficiency of the price discovery process, so that we have got a market exchange rate that rewards not only exporters, but all those that are keen or that are selling foreign exchange to the auction market. You might know that what we have done is to say we want to open the auction market even for exporters. If they want to come and sell their foreign exchange to the auction system, we have had bidders, sellers that have come through, particularly from the NGO community, and it's quite encouraging that there's willingness to sell foreign exchange to the auction system. And the more the supply that we have on the auction system, I think we should be able then to meet the level of demand. of foreign exchange that we are experiencing at the auction, and that should then result in efficient price discovery framework at the auction system. So I want to concur with what has been indicated, and we are quite open, particularly the adjudication committee at the auction. There's been a lot of discussions on how to enhance and to improve on the efficiency of the auction system. The first 4 auctions, they've really taught us a lot. They've exposed us. They've, opened us in terms of what we need to do, and we'll continue to improve. But being mindful of the fact that the key to the sustainability of the auction remains the supply of foreign exchange, and hence the various measures that ought to be put in place to ensure that we encourage generators of foreign exchange to be able to continue to generate such forex, and more importantly, also to be able to sell it through the auction system at competitive rates. Let me also speak into the issue of the 50,000. I think Mr. Mutamba-Nengwe did raise an issue of the 50,000 threshold. What we have done is that in terms of the communication that has come through, the minimum bid is 50,000, and the maximum bid that can be brought to the auction is 500,000. But what we have also done is we have said for those whose bids are less than the minimum threshold of 50,000, banks during the course of the week are supposed to administer foreign exchange transactions as authorized dealers with delegated authority, and all users of foreign exchange who may require support that is less than the minimum bid of 50,000 can approach authorized dealers, and they can actually buy foreign exchange. But I think, as has been indicated, which point we take is that we may probably need to review the threshold. That to me is a ground rule on enhancing the efficiency of the auction system, and that can be done so that at least we have more participation as we improve on the supply of foreign exchange. We also want to open up on the number of people that may directly come through to the auction. Currently, all those with less than 50,000 for your school fees, medicals, other small requirements that are less than 50,000, such have been are being funded through the through banks. The Bankers Association, they do participate, they're a member of the auction system. So they also, then we have also extended the framework of the auction to the banks, so that at the auction rate that is determined through the auction, banks are able to conduct foreign currency transactions. But I think I take note of the issue that Mr. Mutamba-Nengwe has raised. It's very critical, because he is raising issues around the SMEs. And SMEs, we've always seen them as vital engines for growth, and we need to support them. And that brings in the issue of the bureau de change. I think from the inception of the bureau de change framework, what we noted was that much of the foreign exchange activity that was being done through the bureau de change, much of the support was going to SMEs, and a significant chunk of that was made available to SMEs, which was quite encouraging, because then they could approach the bureau de change and get a funding for their various requirements, funding which they could not ordinarily secure from the authorized dealers or from the banking sector. So what we are working on right now is to continue to enhance the visibility of bureau de change as critical market participants as far as the foreign exchange market is concerned. And we are happy with the numbers that have been registered to date, and the volume of transactions that are taking place through the bureau de change. Sorry, excuse me. The volume of transactions that are taking through, that are going through bureau de change, they are quite encouraging. But I think it's improving or enhancing on the efficiency of the bureau de change to ensure that there's an even spread, and more importantly, to ensure that they all participate. Right now, what we are seeing is that only a few bureau de change are able to pull the critical mass to support the those that require foreign exchange. And you'd want as much as possible to ensure that the numbers that have been registered effectively participate and they are able to provide the foreign exchange to the small to medium enterprises, so that we continue to support them. So I would say probably and the other issue maybe that has been raised by the Chamber of Mines relates to the fine tuning of the gold marketing framework so that it meets international best practice. This is something that we are looking at and something that we are working on. Gold is, I think, in terms of our foreign exchange generation, it's a major contributor to the foreign exchange dynamics in our economy. And you would therefore want to ensure that we have put in place a marketing framework that ensures that we're able to harness all the gold that is produced into the economy. We want to take advantage of the firming up of international prices and therefore ensure that we increase production to benefit from the potential foreign exchange that we can actually generate arising from increased production, as well as the firming up the international prices that have actually gone up. So it's something that definitely we are going to speak into going forward. And maybe the other issue, which is the last issue that I'll talk of, is the issue of the foreign exchange retentions. I think is raised also, particularly for the mining sector, and this relates, as indicated, to the exchange rate, which I've said we believe that going forward, the exchange rate will continue to enhance efficiency in terms of price discovery, and to get a market exchange rate that is an exchange rate that is market related, and that should be able to effectively reward exporters and even other generators of foreign exchange on the retention portion or on their sales when they liquidate their foreign exchange to the market. Yes, we have continued to review the policy on retentions, and we do believe that as the exchange rate firms up, that should be able to effectively compensate on the portion of foreign exchange that is liquidated or that is voluntarily sold to the auction market. So I take note of the issues that have been raised, and I think most of the comments that have come through are to do with the stability and the sustainability of the auction, which, if you based by what we have been doing, we have been putting in place ground rules to ensure that we have got a framework that speaks into efficiency in terms of how the auction system is administered, but more importantly, to open up lines for increased supply of foreign exchange to the auction system, because we do believe that is the critical pillar for the sustainability of the auction, the supply of foreign exchange. So I think for now, I will end there. Those are the issues that I got from the presentations that were done during my presence. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masendu. I think you've tackled quite a lot of the questions quite robustly, and we appreciate your feedback. We definitely look forward to some of those issues being covered in the midterm monetary policy statement, which will be coming out in due course. So over to you, our Honorable Minister of Finance. We've received some questions on our various platforms. Some of them are on our Zoom platform in the chat groups. So the captains of industry have shared their concerns, and they would like to hear back from yourself, Honorable Minister, and also maybe from your team regarding the issues that they've raised. We have a question here regarding concerns regarding the health sector. So just continued support to the health sector, given that we're in the middle of coronavirus pandemic, which is affecting all aspects of our industry. And also another question that came through regarding the stock exchange to say, is it not, why punish everyone for a few people's sins? Is it not possible to continue the investigations on the side and reopen the stock exchange again to boost investor confidence. Honorable Professor Mtuli, over to you, sir, to respond to the Captain of Industries and also our guests who are joining us online from various locations. Thank you. Sorry, Honorable Minister, if you may unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. You may continue. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, moderator. Let me thank the colleagues for their contributions and questions and comments and suggestions. But since I was out, I would like my team to respond first, just so I don't miss anything, or rather as a team, we don't miss out on anything. I don't know if P.S. Gomatanga is online now. Maybe we want to tackle some of the questions. P.S. Gomatanga.
I'm online, Honorable Minister. Good morning, Nobile. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. You may turn on your video so that we can see you. You may go ahead.
Okay, let me go ahead. I think let me tackle the issue of support to the vulnerable groups. I think we've put into place various social nets that have been fully supported in the first half of the year. In terms of the proposals to pay cash out to the most vulnerable members of the society, that is actually ongoing. And we've been working very closely with the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare, who have been doing the registration of the beneficiaries. Obviously, that process has not proceeded as fast as we would have wanted it to move, but I think we are now close to 100,000 members who are actually getting the monthly grants from government of 300. There are obviously discussions on reviewing the amount, and we also have further discussions with the ministry that they need to fast track the registration of the beneficiaries. So we have budgeted for that support, and we have been paying those who have been registered, but we just need to move much faster in terms of getting the critical mass, because if our target is 1 million and we are just below 100,000, certainly that's not good enough. We really need to address the issue of registration of beneficiaries, and that is what we are doing on the support to the vulnerable groups of the society in terms of ensuring that they can continue to earn a living during this period of lockdown. I think the issues that we have been handled or already addressed by exchange control, let me just add to that. I think at the end of the day, the issues of retention become irrelevant if the exchange rate is right and stable. Because the issue is never, the retentions have always been provided to cover up for price discovery, which people were uncomfortable with. But once the exchange rate that is available to an exporter is stable and is competitive and is value for money, the issues of retention become irrelevant. And most of the players actually arguing about the retentions were in the market, I think 5-10 years ago or 15 years ago, because previously all proceeds were liquidated on receipt. And that's what happened elsewhere across the globe. So at the end of the day, what we should be aiming for is an acceptable price discovery mechanism, and then ensuring that there's good value for both importers and exporters. Then the issues of retention will fall away. And coming back to the issue of whether we are moving to a dual currency or a mono currency, I think the government position is still that we are pushing for a mono currency. That's the policy. It's a mono currency, but there are transitional policies that we have had to implement to support the economy during this pandemic of COVID. And those should not be mistaken as if we are actually moving away from the stated policy of a monocurrency. In any event, the actions that we have taken are not actually coming from government, but those have actually been requests from industry. So if you actually look at our policies on the exchange rate over the course of the past 12 months, we will show you the proposals that have been obtained and submitted by industry to government. And we've simply followed the suggestions or the proposals as submitted to us by the market players. So these are your policies, and you should work to support them so that we all make them a success. I'll end here and let my colleagues pick up on other issues.
Thank you, Gumatanga. Nobile, again, it's my turn to respond, of course, but I'm allowing my team to go first. Can you hear me, Nobile?
Yes, Honorable Minister, thank you. You may go ahead with your team.
Yes, Vumbe and Clive, are you on the line? Vumbe,
yes,
do you want to respond to a few questions?
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Go ahead, Vumbe, if you need to comment, if you wish to comment on something.
Yes, thank you very much for the contributions. One or two areas on the issue of infrastructure investments which have been raised. These will be key going forward to support productivity and the priorities in the budget and also in the national development strategy. And for these investments, we see a key role for the private sector. And really, we have been in discussion or in the past weeks with the pension and insurance houses to see what role they can play in mobilizing resources for financing infrastructure projects, especially on the road sector in terms of connectivity, which will be critical for development. So yes, the infrastructure investments are critical, but the budget on its own cannot carry these huge investments. There's a huge investment gap. So we are looking forward to the participation of the private sector, including our pension and insurance houses. And then secondly, on the social protection, I think we on the subsidy, we are currently reviewing the subsidy framework in terms of targeting the vulnerable, like the PS Guamatanga has just indicated. Social protection is going to be a key area going forward. And really it's about targeting the vulnerable and ensuring that those who are supposed to benefit will benefit from what we are doing. And then on the COVID, I think, yes, the recent rates of infections are worrying, and we are seeing notices of closure in some companies. But I think we need more investments in the three critical areas of testing, isolation, and tracing. And I think the private sector is a key role to play in these three aspects of containing the rates of inflation. So we hope also the private sector will take a lead in this area, and they put investments into the testing, isolation, and tracing. The last one, I think the minister touched it on earlier on the ease of doing business, which came out again in the conversation. I think it's a critical area. We have seen Zimbabwe starting to move up the ladder, and with the targets we have given ourselves for this year, we hope also this is a continuous process. It's not overnight, it takes time, but it's something of priority to government. I'll end here, Honorable Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vumbe. Pambela, one or two comments that you may have?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Good morning, colleagues. I want to specifically just touch on an issue that colleague Farah Mtambanengwe raised around the IMTT as a constraint to the efficiency or in the SME sector and the potential negative effects. I think that fact is alive to us, but what we also see in the economy is that it is a highly informal economy, and the IMTT, if you recall, was a way of bringing everybody to the table in terms of contributing to the fiscals. And in fact, you will see that the IMTT is actually a major contributor to to the revenue heads when we do the numbers in terms of our ZIMRA collections and so forth. So it is a significant contributor to the budget performance, if I can put it that way, because it is providing the resources that we are pushing towards the social safety nets that the PS just spoke about earlier. And the second issue that he raised, which I think is a very important one, is the access, the limited access of the SME sector to the auction market. And I think the rule book there was very clear when the Reserve Bank announced the auction. The SMEs should access the auction via the authorized dealer network, which comprises the banks and the ADLAs, the Bureau de Change. So really, I think there's a key role those institutions should play in terms of aggregating the requirements from the smaller players. Obviously, the central bank is not a retail bank, and it would be very problematic to have, you know, thousands upon thousands of small bids in the auction. But the mechanism is certainly supposed to operate via the authorized dealer network. We have seen one or two Bureau de Change coming to participate in the auctions. And incidentally, these were actually, they were actually coming to offload Forex that they will have mobilized on the market. So that system, to me, suggests that the system is actually working. So the reverse should also be true. But I think what is also happening is in between auctions, the authorized dealer networks should be available to do trades at the mid-rate around the allowable spreads that have been defined by the central bank. And this system, I think if we all stick our necks out, should actually work and actually improve the liquidity and efficiency of the platform. And his last comment on the impact of the closure of EcoCash on SME operations. I think we need to put it into context and say that the EcoCash platform has not been closed. I think it's really certain aspects of it that were destabilizing, and those are the ones that are being the subject of the ongoing inquiry and investigation. I think for the generality of transactions, bona fide person-to-person remittances, bona fide person-to-business payments, and those I think are working quite well. It is the shadow banking element within the EcoCash platform which was problematic, and those are the connections that have been temporarily disabled for the time being until the inquiries are concluded. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Minister. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Clive. Thank you. Nobile, I'll press on. I just want to come back again to the protection of the vulnerable, social protection, because I can tell that this is a very important issue, and just give additional detail that it's a well-orchestrated program. It's a well-designed program with the various aspects. Now, the core has been aspects around the drought mitigation agenda, where we've been providing food for the vulnerable in the rural areas. And so far, we've spent $414 million in the first half. It's also built around the basic education assistance module, where we've paid school fees for 415,000 school children. And we even paid also examination fees, grade 7, O-level, and A-level. We spent $61 million on that. You know, and then also there's a sustainable livelihoods program. There's a support for the disabled. There's a harmonized cash transfers. There's support for the elderly. And then there's support for children in difficulties, just targeting children as a group. Also, there's health assistance again for the vulnerable, which is outside COVID, that is ongoing. And then you still have the COVID response. So there's a core social protection program that is in place that we've been focusing on, and we've spent $1.3 billion on it in the first half of the year. In addition to that, we have the $300 payout, and so far it's been targeting the urban poor. In the last 40 years, the government has never targeted any urban poor. We didn't even know how to find them. And it's not easy to find the urban poor, by the way. You can see them, you can bump into them from time to time, but you can't systematically identify them. It's far easier in rural areas with far better structures. But nonetheless, we are currently, paying something like 202,000 people, $300 each in response to the COVID pandemic. But also, it is also in lieu of the roller mill, which we know is in short supply. So there's additional work in terms of social protection. A third pillar is we've taken insurance from ARC, which is Africa Risk Capacity Corporation, which is an AU institution chaired by Ngozi Weyala, the former MD of the World Bank. And we paid insurance at the beginning of the year. We have now been able to draw on that insurance. They've given us basically almost $2 million US, which we have now, last week I was busy distributing it on Wednesday last week. And we targeted districts of Binga, the poorest, Binga, Bulima Mangwe, Uzuma Maramba Fungwe, Buera, those kind of districts. So we're very busy to make sure that our vulnerable and poor are supported. Yeah, I think that was really a question that was brought home by Mtashu. On the auction system, my issue on the auction system is that really I'd like to appeal to the private sector to support the market. It is your market as the private sector. Then if it's your market, it becomes our market in the sense that while we as the government, the Reserve Bank has come forward to make sure that it continuously feeds the market with supply. We now need to supply from the banking sector, from the exporters. It is, after all, your market. As Gomatanga put it so well, that you find that all our policies around the exchange rates management system have been triggered by the private sector in the first place, and we've merely just responded. That's what we've done. So please support it. It is your market. We want it to succeed as well. The IMTT, Clive, dealt with that one. And then on the issue of the USD salaries, on the civil servant salaries, we increased what we've done so far as government. We've just made an offer, which is, as employer, we're offering two things. One is to increase salaries by 50%. We've done that. Everyone has been paid. And then we also, above that, we're going to put in a $75 US allowance as well for everyone. And I was just checking again the systems this morning. It looks like all systems go on that. Payments have been made. You can start transacting. The retailers are happy. You can even use your phone as well to pay, not just the card, but you can also use the phone to pay for goods and services in US dollars. Of course, we wouldn't want this to be withdrawn as cash, as government were worried that the cash could find its way into the power market, and then that would be helpful. Just think about it. The lowest paid civil servants, an office orderly, was earning $2,500 a month. Now, $75 US at the current exchange rate gives us 5,200. So basically, through the allowance alone, we've actually increased the salary of the lowest paid person from 2,500. We've put in an additional 5,200. So there we are. They are earning about 8,000 now, and that's a major uplift for civil servants, and the system is working. So we don't think this is too low at all. We think actually, it goes a long way in meeting the requirements in terms of the basket, consumption basket. Then the issue of monocurrency, Gomatanga has dealt with it, and then support for the health sector. We'll continue to do that. The health sector, they haven't even spent half of their budget. But you see, the health sector support is also now multifaceted, because it's not just straight health mitigation issues. There's also a very strong prevention aspect. So that prevention aspect, which is about lockdown, has got to do with for instance, supporting the law enforcement agents. So that also costs money. It's also got to do with the expenditure by the Ministry of Local Government in fixing key hospitals. Like Wilkins doesn't fall under Ministry of Health, it falls under local government. Thorngrove also falls under local government. You look at Egusileni, it's actually a private hospital in a way, well partly owned by NASA, I guess. But the point is that you find that there is expenditure outside the Ministry of Health, which supports the health response aspect in terms of COVID. So money is being spent, and there's a huge health sector budget. I don't think we have a problem here at all in terms of domestic expenditure on health, but also our international partners. They have pledged $202 million and it's rising towards health sector support, towards the COVID response. So I think frankly, our budget for this response is not bad at all. Actually, in my view, it's actually very good. Actually very good. So we should be okay with that. On the ZSC, as I said at the beginning, when I responded just before I went off, was, look, we're just concluding the investigation. We have to be systematic, and then we will open and follow the recommendations which are in this IFU report. It will open. Just be patient. That was a regulatory response to a challenge, and therefore it has to be done systematically. Once we've gone through the report, we'll be able to open and advise how the opening should be done. Finally, let me say, colleagues, is full steam ahead. Let's still focus on production and productivity. Let's keep improving competitiveness. Let's create jobs. COVID destabilized us, but let's stay focused on that agenda. Let's not deviate from that agenda. And that's the same agenda that will come through when you see the draft of the National Development Strategy, which will guide the budget for 2021. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Mthuli Ncube. This has been quite informative, and you have really addressed quite a lot of the questions that have had come through from our various industry captains. Some of the comments that we received as well, you addressed them, and we are very grateful for that. Just a few comments from the audience who are joining us from various locations virtually, to our retailers and also to members of CZI and ZNCC. The request is that please may you encourage your own constituents to use the correct foreign currency exchange rate when they are selling goods or services to the public, so that there isn't an issue of double dipping. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost at the close of our webinar today, brought to you by Daily News. We are broadcasting live from Harare. I would like to hand over to Mr. Louis Chikurune, who will give us the closing remarks. Mr. Chikurune, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Mongobile.
Hello? Hello? Nobile?
Hello, Mr. Kwamatanga. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think the point that your last point is a very critical point. That look, after 4 auctions, we certainly now expect the retail sector to respond by applying the auction rate in their pricing mechanisms. We are now very much concerned with the players who are coming to the auction system, but continue to use other exchange rates in their pricing. The other concern we want to raise with the retail sector is we have also seen an uptick in the US dollar prices, which we also believe are not justified. We have seen prices of some of the basic commodities rise in US dollars. We don't find any justification for that at a time when the auction system is actually allocating close to 90% of the required foreign exchange And as Mr. Masendu highlighted, we have put in a window for those who don't qualify to participate in the auction system to also access the foreign currency. So we expect Mr. Mutashu to go back to his constituents and at least advise them that we are now looking at measures that for those players who are coming to the auction and are double charging, they will also be blacklisted. And if you are coming to the auction, use the auction rate for your pricing. Otherwise, you'll be blacklisted and you'll not be able to participate in the auction. And that there is no justification, I repeat, for the current increases in US dollars that we are observing. I think I should highlight that we are in this together. Let's make sure that this transition is supported by Reserve Bank, by government, and by industry. I thought I should raise these very pertinent issues. Thank you, Nobile, and my apologies, Mr. Kurune, for taking your 2 minutes.
No, it's all right, Permanent Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gwamatanga. Mr. Chikurune, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm confident that today's webinar gave you an opportunity to extract value from our rich and diverse panel of discussants as we engaged them without fear and without favor. The Daily News Business Breakfast Forum will continue to unpack the true Zimbabwean story for the benefit of policymakers, corporates, and the communities that we serve. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank our guest of honor, Professor Mthuli Ncube, for gracing this webinar with sincerity. Thank you, sir. We also thank the Minister of Finance, Permanent Secretary, Mr. George Gwamatanga, and his team for their valued contributions. Allow me to also thank the RBZ Governor, Dr. JP Mangujka, and Mr. Masendu for sharing important insights with us today. To our panelists, who included the CZI President, Mr. Henry Ruzidzo, the Chamber of Mines of Zimbabwe CEO, Mr. Isaac Kwesu, the ZNCC Vice President, Mr. Achidongo, the Bankers Association of Zimbabwe Vice President, Mr. Ronald Mtandagai, the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers President, Mr. Denford Mtashu, and the Executive Officer of the SME Association of Zimbabwe, Mr. Farai Mtambanengwe. Your passionate contributions were loud and clear. Thank you very much for your candid input into this discourse. To our moderator, the one and only Nobile Mzara, thank you very much for a job well done. Last but not least, we thank all our valued stakeholders for the continued support, including the avid Daily News readers, our loyal advertisers, our event partners, and our event delegates. To the entire Daily News team, thank you for making this webinar a success. Until next time, thank you, stay safe, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, and God bless you too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, appreciate it.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you very much, Daily News.
Most welcome, sir.
Well done, Louis. Thanks. Keep safe.
Thank you, my brother. Keep well too.